big question surrounding Wrong Turn 8 is pretty simple. Should the franchise reboot itself all over again, or should it finally return to its roots with a legacy sequel? It's an interesting debate, because this series has already reinvented itself once, and now it has another chance to decide what kind of horror franchise it wants to be moving forward. When the original Wrong Turn arrived back in 2003, it was a surprise hit because it brought back the feel of brutal backwoods horror movies from the 70s and 80s while giving everything a slick, modern look. It wasn't a massive blockbuster, but it earned enough attention to build a loyal fanbase. That success quickly led to Wrong Turn 2: Dead End, which skipped theaters and went straight to DVD. Even though it had a much smaller release, many horror fans still consider it the strongest movie in the entire franchise because it embraced the gore, the action, and the over-the-top survival elements without losing what made the original entertaining. Wrong Turn 2 was so well received, so the franchise kept going with a whole bunch of direct-to-video sequels. At first, that seemed like a smart move because horror fans are always looking for another slasher movie to watch. But the longer the series continued, the more obvious its problems became. The story started following the exact same formula. The budgets became smaller, and every sequel felt less exciting than the one before it. Instead of finding fresh ideas, the movies mostly repeated what audiences had already seen. Things became even more complicated after Wrong Turn 3: Left for Dead. That movie killed off the franchise's biggest villain, Three Finger, which created a huge problem for future installments. It was a situation that felt very similar to what happened in the Saw franchise after John Kramer, better known as Jigsaw, died. Even though Jigsaw was dead, the later Saw movies kept finding ways to include him through endless flashbacks because he had become the face of the series. Wrong Turn faced a similar challenge because Three Finger was such an important part of the franchise that it was difficult to continue without him. So instead of moving the timeline forward, the filmmakers decided to go backward. Wrong Turn 4, 5, and 6 all became prequels set before the original movies. That allowed Three Finger and the rest of his murderous family to return once again, hunting a bunch of unlucky people who happened to wander into the wrong place at the wrong time. Although the movie still delivered bloody kills and plenty of gruesome moments, many fans felt like the franchise was simply repeating itself instead of growing into something new. Eventually, the series decided it needed a complete reset. That's exactly what happened with Wrong Turn in 2021, which essentially acted as the seventh movie while ignoring everything that came before it. Instead of continuing the story of the mutant cannibal family, the reboot introduced a completely different threat. A group of friends hiking along the Appalachian Trail ended up discovering a hidden community called the Foundation, a secretive cult that viewed outsiders as enemies and had absolutely no problem killing anyone who crossed their path. This was a massive change for the franchise because the focus shifted away from deformed killers living in the woods. Instead, the danger came from an isolated society with its own rules, traditions, and twisted sense of justice. The movie still featured violent traps, brutal deaths, and plenty of horror scenes, but it also tried exploring themes involving modern society, politics, and fear of outsiders. Because of those bigger ideas, the reboot stood apart from every previous Wrong Turn movie. Even though some people appreciated that ambition, the reboot ended up splitting the fanbase almost right down the middle. A lot of viewers liked that it wasn't simply copying the original movies because it attempted something different. Others felt the complete opposite because they believed it abandoned everything that made Wrong Turn recognizable in the first place. Without Three Finger and his family, many longtime fans argued that it didn't even feel like a Wrong Turn movie anymore. The ending also left the door open for another chapter if the filmmakers ever wanted to continue that version of the story. Jen, played by Charlotte Vega, finally escaped after killing the leader of the Foundation, who had forced her into becoming his partner. She managed to survive the nightmare and leave the cult behind. Because of that ending, a sequel could easily show Jen returning to destroy whatever remained of the Foundation once and for all. On the other hand, the surviving members of the cult could decide to track her down and take revenge for what happened. Pretending they deserve another continuation probably wouldn't excite many fans. That's why a soft reboot might actually be the strongest direction for Wrong Turn 8. Instead of starting completely over again, the movie could acknowledge the original 2003 film while ignoring most of the later sequels. Plenty of horror franchises have successfully used this approach because it allows new audiences to jump in without watching every previous installment. While longtime fans still get a continuation connected to the movie they actually remember. A legacy sequel could also help bring Wrong Turn back to theaters instead of remaining a straight-to-video franchise. The original movie still has a dedicated cult following, and nostalgia has become a powerful tool for horror studios over the last several years. Movies like Halloween, Scream, and Candyman prove that returning to classic stories decades later can attract both old fans and newcomers. Wrong Turn may not have the same level of popularity as those franchises, but it still has enough recognition to benefit from a similar strategy. Of course, creating a legacy sequel comes with its own challenges. One of the biggest issues involves bringing back original cast members. Eliza Dushku, who played Jessie in the first movie, appears to have largely stepped away from acting, so convincing her to return might not be easy. Without one of the original survivors leading the story, the filmmakers would need another way to connect the sequel to the 2003 film while still making it feel meaningful. Even with those obstacles, a legacy sequel probably offers more excitement than revisiting either the sixth movie or the 2021 reboot. It could introduce a fresh group of characters while bringing back the terrifying atmosphere, isolated forests, and relentless survival horror that made the original memorable. Fans have waited a long time to see the franchise return to those basics because that's where Wrong Turn was always at its strongest. There is another possibility though, and it's one that could completely reshape the franchise again. Wrong Turn 8 could adopt an anthology approach, where every new movie tells an entirely different story using only the basic idea of people making one terrible wrong turn. Since the 2021 reboot already proved the title doesn't necessarily need Three Finger or his family, each future installment could introduce brand new villains, settings, and horror concepts without worrying about continuity. The Halloween franchise famously attempted something similar decades ago with Halloween 3: Season of the Witch. That movie ignored Michael Myers completely and told an unrelated horror story instead. Although audiences rejected the idea at the time because they expected another Michael Myers movie, Season of the Witch slowly developed a cult following over the years as people began appreciating it on its own terms. Wrong Turn could potentially follow that same path by embracing standalone stories connected only through the franchise name. And that's that for today's video. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.